The reason Andrew Parker Bowles divorced Queen Camilla is much more surprising than the public ever realized, and he finally broke his silence after decades of royal rumors and quiet. Under the cover of public appearances and royal protocol, rumors about their breakup raged for more than 30 years. However, Parker Bowles is now revealing a story of treachery, heartache, and secrets hidden deep within the monarchy with an open confession. But just what did he have to go through? And why now is he disclosing it? Everything is altered by the truth, the crown's hidden reality. Andrew Parker Bowles, a former Army brigadier renowned for his calm manner, stoic stillness, and refusal to stir things up, was for years the epitome of restraint. However, he's finally opening up after decades of suppressing his thoughts. He explains gently that history keeps making mistakes, not for drama, attention, or retaliation. The plot was thought to be straightforward by most. It was a royal love triangle gone wrong when Camilla left him for Charles. Andrew, however, feels that well-known story falls far short. He claims that they believe I left because of Charles. In actuality, though, I could have cohabitated with Charles. Camilla and I couldn't cohabitate, as she developed. The royal environment was rocked by those remarks like thunder. They were neither angry nor frigid. They were very honest, and they completely turned the story around. For many years, Andrew was viewed by the general public as the forgotten guy, the forsaken spouse, and the victim of Camilla's unquenchable passion for the future monarch. However, Andrew presents a much more nuanced and disturbing image. This had to do with more than love or infidelity. It was about change, about seeing someone you knew so well turn into a complete stranger, motivated not only by feelings but also by strategy, ambition, and an unconscious desire for power. He has clear memories of the early days when she was a lady who loved bravely, laughed readily, and didn't hesitate to stir things up. He claims that Camilla gradually vanished. She was replaced by someone colder, more cunning, and focused on something much larger than her husband or her house. According to Andrew, she didn't simply fall in love with Charles. She fell in love with the benefits of being by his side. Just one statement says a lot. It eliminates the sentimentality and the long-standing romance that the palace and press have been spinning. Andrew's comments have an uncanny weight now that Camilla is sitting next to the King of England, clad in diamonds, and crowned as queen consort. He questions the fairy tale explanation for her achievement, but he doesn't aim to deprive her of the title. For decades, the palace has meticulously cultivated a public perception of Camilla as a misinterpreted individual who was a victim of unfortunate circumstances. However, Andrew's story points to something very different, more intentional, because ambition, legacy, and the silent deterioration of a relationship under the spotlight of royal opportunity are all themes in this drama, which goes beyond a failed marriage. It wasn't a straightforward act of love when Camilla left Andrew's life. Her husband was left standing in the rubble, uncertain of how or when he lost her, as a result of a change in identity and a jump toward power. One concern stands out above the others as critics debate whether Andrew's disclosures could damage the Queen Consort's well-cultivated image, and publicists and court staff rush to evaluate the consequences. In reality, what did Camilla give up to hold that position? Because Andrew and Camilla existed before the scandals, before Charles, before the royal gates even opened. They appeared to be a match made in heaven, and for a while they were aristocratic royalty in their own right. Both came from wealthy families, were steeped in tradition, and were endowed with charm and social influence when they first met in the late 1960s. With his good looks, composure, connections, and rapid ascent through the ranks of the British Army, Andrew was the epitome of the ideal suitor. In contrast, Camilla Shand was a memorable, witty, and gregarious person who was loved by everyone around her for her irreverence and grounded sense of humor. She was all the more alluring for her disdain for royal formality. Their chemistry was evident as they were frequently seen together at fox hunts and polo matches. According to magazine spreads, they were a match made to last a lifetime. However, there were severe fissures behind the glistening exterior. The details of Andrew's affairs were well known. Among his pals, he was seen as a ladies' man who was always flirting. What about Camilla? She wasn't the gullible spouse who endured everything in silence. She was aware of the game's regulations. Discretion was a social necessity, and among the upper class, appearance frequently took precedence over feeling. However, even Andrew might not have recognized this at the time. Even though Camilla smiled at Andrew from the other side of the polo field, her heart was still bound to another man. Thus, she was never truly his, neither romantically nor emotionally. Subtle compromises, secret affairs, and a growing desire for something more were the signs of the fractures showing. However, what hints has Andrew been noticing? Keep an eye out. What happened to Andrew Parker Bowles in Camilla's royal tale? On the surface, their love story started off like many others in the British aristocracy, well-mannered, polished, and at the ideal moment. Both Camilla and Andrew Parker Bowles were raised in affluent families, shaped by customs, and surrounded by similar social groups. However, Prince Charles was a constant threat to their marriage from the start. Camilla married Andrew in the early 1970s while Charles was away on Navy duty. Many saw it as a good and acceptable match, a clever, socially savvy woman for a trustworthy army guy. In retrospect, however, Andrew says the choice was more about surrender than love. He now asserts that Charles was never really absent. In a rare, open statement, Andrew has admitted that he never left our marriage, not for a second. The indications were present even in the early days. Some letters Camilla kept hidden. Behind closed doors, her phone calls always appeared to have a different weight. Both of them were frequently invited to Charles's mansion, Highgrove, but Andrew thought the invitations were intended for just one person. But life continued. Tom and Laura were their two children. They portrayed the contented, compatible pair. Camilla graciously ran the household, entertained guests with her wit, and prepared sophisticated country dinners. For a while, that felt sufficient. However, Andrew claims that despite the smiles, there was always a gap, a silent gap that never went away. He explains that she was loyal in all the anticipated ways. She took care of our kids, did her job, and never made me look foolish in front of others. However, a wall separated us. It was impossible for me to climb over. The height of that invisible wall simply increased. Slowly, what seemed like a marriage turned into more of an arrangement. Together, they went about their lives as courteous strangers, going to events, posing for pictures, and saying all the appropriate things. However, they lived far apart at home. Friends said their relationship was cold yet courteous. No arguments, no fervor, just quiet. Camilla was experiencing a quiet awakening, while Charles and Diana's marriage broke down in the public eye. Andrew says she started to change. She talked more about the royal life's organization than the kids. She became interested in placement and protocol instead of parties and gossip. According to Andrew, it wasn't that she missed Charles, it was that she started imagining him as she built her life. She began creating a new reality with him after leaving ours. Once thought to be ideal, the marriage was now really a skillfully constructed delusion. Camilla's subtle metamorphosis went unreported, while the media was fixated on Charles and Diana. They thought Charles was the bad guy, Andrew replies quietly. Camilla, however, had a different plot. I just wasn't involved anymore. Andrew claims that even after more than 20 years of marriage, he frequently felt like a supporting cast member in someone else's story. He was losing more than just his wife. He was totally disappearing from her life. It was seen by their buddies. Their employees witnessed it. Their kids sensed it too. Despite not being visible, Charles was always sensed. Andrew remembers that there was a ghost in the room. There was an unstated third party in every dispute. Every celebration has an unseen visitor. But it was not the betrayal that hurt the most. The erasure was the cause. In the now leaked interview, Andrew said that affairs are more than just sex. This was strategic, emotional, and worse in some respects. He had been aware from the beginning that Camilla and Charles had remained close. The royal family's demands had disrupted the romance but not destroyed it. It had been decided that Charles was not fit to wed Camilla. Too many opinions, too many rules. Thus Camilla followed the rules. She wed a titled, well-connected officer who was the ideal substitute. However, the letters continued. Andrew recalls discovering them concealed within Camilla's desk. He claims it's intimate rather than graphic, the kind of familiarity that a married woman and a friend do not share. Initially, Andrew ignored it. In their society, discreet affairs were accepted. Charles, however, wasn't just a fad. He was enmeshed. For weekends, Camilla would disappear while pretending to be visiting friends. Highgrove sent out more invitations, some specifically for her. Their kids started to notice too. "Mom, where are you going?" became a query that Andrew was unable to honestly respond to. Andrew informed the interviewer, "You can live through betrayal. However, being invisible? That's a whole other story." Camilla stopped trying to conceal her disengagement. Friends remember awkward dinners where she seemed bored when Andrew spoke, but brightened up at the mention of Charles's name. Her lack of interest became irrefutable. Andrew is slowly moving to the side. Was he quietly cut from the screenplay, or did he leave on his own terms? Remain with us. When ambition overcame affection, the infamous Camilla Gate tapes rocked the country in 1993. Prince Charles and Camilla had a very private and intimate phone call that was abruptly made public. Princess Diana was crushed, and the nation was in disbelief. Andrew Parker Bowles, though, it did not surprise him. Silently he confessed, "I had known for years." Hearing the response from the rest of the world was an odd experience for him. Now his hidden reality was revealed. That's when he realized it was really over. Andrew, however, did not respond angrily or theatrically. He didn't start a scandal or swarm the media. Rather, he gradually distanced himself, first physically, then emotionally, and last legally. His rage had subsided. He was just finished. Andrew had faithfully accepted his positions as a spouse, soldier, and background character for decades.
However, Andrew became aware of something more profound as Charles and Camilla's affair progressed from rumors to news reports. He never played a significant role in the narrative. Their marriage terminated because of this agonizing realization more than the actual betrayal. Andrew had stopped asking questions by the late 1980s. Charles's name no longer made him wince, and he no longer demanded answers for Camilla's frequent absences and disturbed moods. He was surprised at how much Camilla had changed. He remembered that she wasn't the same woman I married. Charles wasn't the only focus anymore. It had developed into something more significant: strength. The change was slight at first. Camilla started going to carefully curated social gatherings that were attended by political insiders, royal aides, and nobles. She was networking, forming connections with politicians near the throne, powerful confidants, and former press officers. She used to make fun of that world of formality and regal games, Andrew recalled. After that, though, she began to play and win those games. The public breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage coincided with Camilla's metamorphosis. Camilla discreetly worked behind the scenes to establish her position in the evolving royal landscape as Diana gained the public's sympathies. A strategist who was more concerned with legacy than love took the place of the carefree lady who had previously scorned convention. Staff said Camilla started meeting privately with royal protocol officers and communications specialists. After serving in the military, Andrew recalled coming home finding files beneath her desk containing personal notes, talking points, and newspaper clippings. After that, there were hours of phone conversations on scheduling, timing, and public perception. She was no longer merely organizing social gatherings. She was preparing to live next to the king. Following one of Camilla's secret visits to Highgrove, a longtime family servant described a terrifying incident. "One day this house won't mean anything," Camilla stated with a sly smile as she walked into the room and spoke to Andrew. "I'll have one that's better." Those words stuck, but Andrew didn't answer. It wasn't just idle chatter. It showed her attitude. She had stopped dreaming. She had a plan. Life at home became colder. As Camilla spent more time in London, she became more intimate with the inner circle and royal aides. Their once friendly, lively meetings became contrived, politicized, and rigid. As a result, Andrew was marginalized and merely a decorative element in his own house. "She stopped being my wife at some point," Andrew said gently. "She became the ambitious partner of another person." His voice is one of quiet, tired acceptance rather than resentment. Instead of love itself, the lady he married had been swept away by the promise of what love could offer. Out of pride, loyalty, and concern for their kids, Andrew stayed longer than others would have. But he knew the truth in his heart. Camilla had stopped pursuing a man. She was trying to win a crown. The moment of rupture that resulted in divorce. Their delicate world was finally broken by what subtle fracture? Find out which moments caught everyone off guard by continuing to watch. The ultimate tipping point. Andrew Parker had changed into a man who appeared more like a shadow than a presence by the early 1990s. He had a title, but his soul had quietly departed. He had long since given up on trying to patch up his marriage. Camilla hardly ever appeared, and when they did talk, it seemed robotic and cold, like they were merely following the script. Their children were raised in a household where obligation and outward appearances had taken the place of affection and tenderness. Andrew persuaded himself to put up with it all for years in order to protect his family, his reputation, and what he called his mission. But he was breaking in his heart. Interestingly, it was not the well-known turbulence around Charles that marked the turning point. It resulted from an intimate, heartbreaking encounter between Andrew and Camilla that crushed any remaining optimism he may have had. Her mood is sour and abrasive. Words were spoken, words that will always haunt Andrew. Camilla made a terrifying revelation during the heated fight that was so brutally honest that it went deeper than any betrayal. "This was always going to be a short-term marriage, Andrew. You weren't the destination, you were the bridge." Andrew was astounded by the words' icy clarity. This was different from the coldness he had come to expect from her. It was more than a simple insult. It was an admission that she had never really cared for him. He only served as a stopgap, a phase in her path to something else. Andrew subsequently stated, "I gave her everything I had. I was dependable. My name was quiet." But she erased it all in that instant. The breakup of their marriage was not the only thing that hurt him. That was Camilla's description of their shared life. She saw the kids, the family, and the house as merely a stop along the way to something greater and more significant. "I can handle the betrayal," Andrew said. He could put up with Charles's involvement as well as the public shame. However, it was intolerable to learn that their family and kids were only brief stops on her path. Something inside Andrew altered that night. He didn't yell at attorneys or bang doors. A silent part of him instead shut down. Their marriage was reduced to a formality after that. He physically separated them by moving to a different area of their estate within a few months. Soon after, he discreetly started the divorce process. The palace knew exactly what was going on. Officials urged for a peaceful, private resolution in the face of leaking audio and growing rumors. No media yelling matches or public turmoil, just a fresh start. Later, Andrew clarified that it was about safeguarding the image, her and Charles. "I concurred. I did not want to raise my kids in a circus." In 1995, the divorce was finalized on January 11th. Not much was stirred by the news. The people hardly paid any attention. and just as silently as he had entered the royal story, Andrew vanished from it. His quiet, however, was anything but tranquil. It was a matter of survival. Andrew emphasized that leaving was not a show of weakness. It was the best decision he had ever made. He left because Camilla had lost faith in their life, not because she had fallen in love with someone else. His eyes harden as he remembers that last devastating argument, yet he doesn't blame her or despise her. The affair wasn't the only thing. It was the knowledge that he was never destined to be her lifelong partner. Just a brief pause. Andrew declined all interviews following the divorce. He didn't write any memoirs or say anything nasty to the media. Rather, he softly and dignifiedly disappeared. Instead of being overwhelmed by one of the most notorious royal scandals, a guy who had been on the outside of it decided to leave. He once commented, "I didn't want the attention. All I wanted was serenity." What secret had Andrew kept hidden that may make all the difference in the world as he moved on with his life, letting go of the past that had burdened him? To find out the truth, keep your eyes fixed to your screen. Andrew Parker Bowles, taking back life outside the castle. Andrew Parker Bowles discreetly marries his longtime companion and landscape designer Rosemary Dickinson in 1996. It was a modest private wedding with no flashing cameras or royal hoopla. After years of observing his own life from the sidelines, this man was now attempting to create something genuine once more. Andrew finally turned his attention to his children, his horses, and his regiment after suffering the heartache of a marriage lost in duty and silence. He continued to participate in the home duties, maintained close relationships with his grandchildren, and discovered contentment in a more subdued, grounded existence. After years too close to royal intrigue and emotional emptiness, friends claim that Andrew has found himself again. He said that life wasn't lonely without Camilla. It was authentic. However, that does not imply that he came out unscathed. It seemed odd to him to see Camilla once again in the spotlight, first as Charles's friend, then as his wife, and finally as queen consort. Andrew acknowledged that "I hardly recognized her." His wife was intelligent, kind, and vivacious. He saw a different figure, one that was remote, majestic, and in control, standing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Although she might not have required it, she appeared to have finally obtained what she desired. Some people notice a subtle melancholy when Andrew talks about the past, despite his assertions that he has no resentment. He has a particular affinity for Diana, whom he has met multiple times and characterizes as profoundly hurt but not dramatic. He said she wasn't upset. She was grieving for a man who was never truly hers. Andrew had experienced a similar story, so he knew that agony. He paused before responding, "No, I don't regret it," when asked if he had ever regretted marrying Camilla. "We enjoyed our years together and had 2 amazing kids, but I do wish I had left sooner, since I didn't realize I was only a stand-in for her when I was no longer her partner." In royal circles, Andrew, who had the opportunity to sell his story for fame and wealth but decided against it, became something of a quiet legend as he got older. Despite having every right to be resentful, the ex-husband tried to improve. He occasionally attends royal functions, usually discreetly observing from a few seats back. In 2005, he even went to Charles and Camilla's wedding. According to Andrew, that marked the end of a book I had long since finished. Andrew saw life without Camilla as a chance to rediscover who he was. The public frequently portrayed him as the man Camilla left behind, but the truth was much more nuanced. Walking away from someone you were expecting to be with forever can sometimes be the most powerful deed. Andrew had been marginalized in royal history for years. A future king subtly replaced a husband with a name that was spoken but seldom examined. However, his voice eventually altered the course of events after 30 years of stillness. The public assumed that he had left because of an affair, because of Charles, because he had fallen victim to a decades-long love affair. Andrew's truth, however, was much more difficult and quiet. It was Camilla, not Charles, he claimed. By putting her life before ours, she developed into the person she is today. This admission changes everything. By exposing the goal hidden beneath the love story, it calls into question the fairy tale. It serves as a reminder to the general people that every royal headline has a human cost. Andrew was the one who quietly, rather than through public spectacle, witnessed his marriage disintegrate. It has been amazing to watch Camilla go from mistress to queen consort. However, Andrew's statements make clear what was overlooked in the process: a home, a spouse, and an unpower-influenced version of herself. This fact may be a silent regret for Charles, evidence that the love he clung to cost him dearly. For William and Kate, who are now in charge of preserving the monarchy's reputation, Andrew's viewpoint serves as a sobering lesson. For everyone else, it's an opportunity to see the true story beneath the staged grins and lavish state banquets. Not all crowns are honorable. Not all romantic tales have a happy ending. However, Andrew Parker Bowles has finally shared his experience after years of keeping quiet. What, in your opinion, prompted him to speak forward now? Post your comments below. Remember to subscribe and like.